Good morning, everyone. I'm Renata Vinci from the University of Palermo. Today, I want to talk to you about modern teaching and interactive content in Chinese children magazine between the 19th and the 20th centuries. Starting from the first experiments made by foreign and local publishing groups in the second half of the 19th century, newspapers and magazines in China addressed the problem of making information accessible to all population, with the intention of allowing a greater and a more direct participation in the public debate, the so-called yulen. Finding a way to overcome the obstacle of illiteracy therefore represented a focal aspect of the debate and of the efforts of the editorial staff. They often attempted to simplify reading content and make them more accessible. As a consequence of these efforts, many specialized papers were born to address readers that traditionally had a lower education, in particular women and children. I will just refer to the second category today to illustrate how this inclusive initiative combined with the most recent printing technique and the more modern theories on education that were circulating in China at the turn of the century. First, I want to start from the editorial of the first issue of the paper Shenbao from 1872, in which the paper assert the universality of the printing medium by saying that they want to address not just scholars and officials, but also workers, farmers, and merchants. Anyhow, the journalistic style of the Shenbao inherited very much from the traditional prose, the traditional writing, so sometimes it was obscure to the masses. However, they made several attempts to establish more easy reading publication. For example, in 1876, we have the vernacular paper Minbao, and in 1877, the next year, the pictorial huabao. Both of them were soon discontinued, but the most successful enterprise launched by the Shenbao was the pictorial Liang Qichao huabao that lasted from 1894 to 98. Later, in 1895, we also find an editorial titled On the Educational Role of Pictorials, which stressed the importance of pictorials in their formative and didactic role, mostly based on three relevant aspects, which are the strict connection between text and images, the difficulty to access papers and magazines content for illiterate people, which in China were the majority, but also the ability of the pictorial to expand the access to the most recent news from all over the world, not just to workers, farmers, and merchants, as they said before in the inaugural issues, but also to peasants, women, and children. And especially children are considered the exemplary readers of huabao because they are naturally attracted by images, shapes, and colors, but also because huabao allow to convey them some knowledge and to exploit the state of childhood when memory is more solid and more long-lasting. They also allow to anticipate some knowledge that if one could only rely on written text, they had to wait a few more years. The problem of illiteracy also worried the scholar Liang Qichao, which addressed this problem is in his article youxue on children's education in 1897. About this, he says, if we have all a round head, square feet, five senses, 2 arms and 2 legs, why there are between China and the West such a big difference in terms of the number of illiterate people? In the same essay, Liang Qichao identified the cause of this phenomenon in the shortcoming of the educational system, which was based in the memorization of classics, but also in the backwardness of school program, as well as in the old training system of teachers. To him, these elements were even stronger in villages and rural areas. Liang Qichao thought that the mnemonic system and the selection of canonic texts was originated in the system of imperial examination. And imperial examination were the reason why people at the time studied for other people instead of themselves. So here we can find the idea of Confucianism Confucian teaching, 学之为己 instead of 学之为人. And I quote, "The reason why children recite the classics is to pass the imperial examination, mostly to get a high placement. If we assume that Buddhists were the one to select officials, the sentence, 'This is what I've heard,' once the Buddha, etc., etc., would resonate all over the classrooms, while if they were Christians, the schools would be filled with the world was created in 7 days. And no one would mention the 5 classics and the 4 books anymore." So the proposal and reform theory launched by Liang Qichao is always proposed in a comparison and dialogue between past and future, old and new, traditional and modern, and in, as I said, in dialogue which is addressed in 2 directions, always looking at the example provided by Western experience and also looking at the foundation provided by Chinese tradition, from which essence Chinese society was drifting away time after time. For example, he says that in ancient times people used to teach from simple to complex, from superficial to deep. Today is not the same. The order is reversed and is going in the wrong direction. This system used by ancient Chinese it was similar to the method adopted in the West, because he says that in the West, the Western methods involve first learning the alphabet, then explain the difference between words, then building sentence, and only at the end studying the written composition without skipping any steps. Another principle asserted by Liang Qichao is that of utility. Like him, the intellectuals of the late 19th and early 20th century argue that young people education was the basis for the future of nation. They saw children's active role in developing society, and they intended education as a preparatory phase for adulthood. Therefore, Liang Qichao appreciated the Western method because it allowed to reach the maximum result with minimum effort, and because after a few years, children already knew the most useful knowledge and competencies for their future life. So by placing at the center practical learning objectives and the vision of a child as an individual in theory, Liang Qichao seems also to anticipate by a few years the theories by John Dewey, which were officially introduced in China in 1919 by Yuxue. Of course, were the Protestant missionaries that contributed to disseminate the new theories and pedagogical methods based on the idea of the Western philosopher. For example, the idea of children as tabula rasa and the idea of childhood as a plastic stage, which was part of the theory of John Locke. Finally, among the proposals launched by Liang Qichao, we find the key role of enjoyment. In his proposal, we see that, according to him, teachings had to be conveyed with entertaining methods, songs, rhymes, folk songs, in order to allow children to enjoy learning and to get explanation in an easier way. So here we find the idea of study both in the sense of xue and in the sense of xi, so study and practice, combined with the idea of le, of enjoyment, of delight. And in this case, again, Liang Qichao is put in a continuity with Confucius' teaching in the idea of personal cultivation as authentic pleasure. Today, I will focus on to show you how these modern theories, mostly the one also designed by Liang Qichao and re-elaborated from the Western background, were applied in children press, and to this purpose I selected one pictorial, 儿童教育画. However, I would like to show you first two examples that can be considered forerunner for the printing industry. The first example is Xiaohai yuebao, the child's paper that was founded by the American Presbyterian Medical Mission in Canton and later moved to Shanghai. The motto of this newspaper was moral, religious, scientific, instructive, and amusing. So this also seems to anticipate by a few decades, a couple of decades, the principle enunciated by Liang Qichao. In the page of this paper, we can find mostly black and white figures that mostly go together with the written text and readings, focus on religious and moral topic most of all, but also cultural, historical, and scientific readings, as well as tales and music. However, the circulation was very limited to the American religious communities, but anyway, this paper can be considered a forerunner for, first of all, for the use of images and illustrations, and second of all, because it is the first paper for children. The second example is the Yuebao, the children's educator. This is the first periodical launched by an entirely Chinese-managed editorial staff. Was founded in 1897 by the Menxue Gonghui, the Association for the Elementary Education. The purposes of this association were to set out a system to educate the masses and strengthen the nation. So this paper is mostly built like a sort of primer because it included several columns structured like lessons according to children age and level of education. So we have some content that were good for children from 3 to 5, from 5 to 7 years old, and so on. And the content encompasses the entire range of children education, including geography, new characters, new words, mathematics, history, and so on. Moreover, both in this gradual process, so in its structure very similar to a primer, and in the presence of some columns dedicated to adults, we can imagine, therefore, that adults were intended as co-reader of this paper. In particular, there is a column titled 世界教育观, Educational Perspective from the World, which introduced to tutors, adults, teachers, any sort of didactic methods and pedagogical theories and techniques coming from all over the world. So adults were involved not just as trainers, but also as a part of a self-training process. So let's move to my case study, which is 儿童教育画. I consider this paper a further development of the previous paper because it adopted more modern printing technique and layout. The motto of this magazine was 度画着往上 引起儿童想学, which we can translate like studying with images, studying while having fun. And the newspaper comprehended more or less 20 pages, which covered the entire spectrum of knowledge and skills necessary for a comprehensive education of young people. As for the introduction of scientific knowledge, some simple notions of physics are presented in an interactive way by means of illustrations and short explanatory text. They encourage children to practice easy experiments, both alone and with peers. For example, demonstrate the effect of air pressure by blowing a paper ball into a bamboo tube, or listening to the sound produced by the vibration of a string stretched close to the ear. With the same technique, also simple math operations and manual skills were presented in a playful way. Moreover, game is intended also both as an individual and a group activity. The intent is that of stimulating intellectual skills, but also spreading the importance of sociality, which is experienced at this stage by interacting with peers. So young readers are encouraged to implement the problem-solving skills with mazes and puzzles, to increase the perception of space and orientation by playing blindfolded games, and also to strengthen their body by playing and practicing gymnastics with other children. So in the light of the most recent educational system, there is a new role that games cover in the education of the future Chinese society. The idea is to develop an enjoyable and pleasant way of learning, and therefore game become in all extent a formative moment. So, to draw some conclusion, I would like to point out a few aspects. First of all, the new perception of the educational process and the conception of childhood in children's magazine appear extremely modern if compared with the Neo-Confucian idea of having to mold the ideal child based on Confucian virtues. Moreover, game that was before perceived as a deviance according to the orthodox education is now considered a formative moment. In the past, for example, illustrious philosophers of the past were characterized by exemplary childhood. For example, the biographies of Zhu Xi depict him like a child who stayed very far away from games. So now play a game became a way to develop and acquire knowledge and practical skills, but also to develop social skills. Moreover, the pictorials, thanks to their immediate visual aid, help the application of the new pedagogical theory and allow to develop and shape children as autonomous subject. Finally, this magazine presented themselves not just as learning platform for children, but also for adults, which were intended as co-recipient, co-readers. Thank you all for listening, and please, if you have any comments or thought, write me an email.